Mr. President.
Senator from Oregon.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to suspend the quorum call.
Without objection.
And, Mr. President, I ask to speak as if in morning business for up to 10 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, I rise today to recognize the dedicated service of one of my team members, Claire Griffin. Claire retired this January after a long and eventful career. She stuck with me through thick and thin, from when I was a newly elected state representative to the speakership of the Oregon House, and finally to my service here in the U.S. Senate. I first met Claire in 1998 at a candidate training event when I was running for the Oregon House. Claire came as a campaign manager for another candidate who was running for a tough race in an open seat. And Claire and her candidate kept making key points, responding to all the questions being asked about how you would run your campaign, and I just kept thinking, I am in so much trouble. I wish I had it together like the two of them. Well, they were enormously outspent in their race and didn't win but finished respectably. And it was just after the election that the candidate called me up and encouraged me to hire Claire for my team. And so I did, and thus began a wonderful 13-year partnership. One of the first things I got to know about Claire was that while she had moved to Oregon, she was steeped in California politics. Her face would light up with stories from her California days. Jesse Unruh, the former California Assemblyman, treasurer, and speaker, figured prominently in these stories. The underlying theme of these stories was that if I had just a fraction of Speaker Unruh's political smarts, we could get a lot more done. Fortunately, Claire did what she could to help provide those political smarts for me. During these years, I was working full-time for the World Affairs Council, and in addition to serving as a legislator, with citizen legislator system in Oregon. And this greatly increased Claire's workload. And on pretty much a daily basis, it increased her blood pressure. I don't know how I would have gotten through those years without her extraordinary diligence. I kept hearing from constituents how promptly Claire responded when they called my legislative office. In fact, I think a good share of the folks in my Oregon House district thought that Claire was the state representative and I was assisting her. Then in 2003, our collective experience took a big turn. The good news for Claire was that I resigned from my day job as director of the World Affairs Council of Oregon, and I could finally devote myself fully to my responsibilities as a state legislator. The bad news for her blood pressure was that I also decided to make a long-shot bid to be House Democratic leader. Claire always says she was sure I would win. I, on the other hand, was equally sure I would not win. But as so often has proved the case over time, Claire was right and I was wrong. And when the first day of the voting arrived, it became clear after the first ballot that the race was going to be a close three-way contest. And in the next two rounds of voting, one of us won and the other two tied, so nobody was out of the race. And so the voting continued. And then I finally won on the fifth ballot, bringing a new challenge for Claire, developing a strong working relationship with the entire House Democratic leadership. Over the next 3 years, Claire had to hear me obsess over the challenge of recruiting candidates in 60 districts, raising funds, developing a policy agenda, and overcoming the sometimes dramatic ups and downs of a state legislature. But together, we soldiered on. Starting in the 2005 session, Claire took on a new duty, the essential task of training and mentoring the Democratic legislative assistants. Just as she had impressed me in that first fortuitous meeting in 1998, she impressed her new trainees. Many of the LAs would stop me in the halls of the Capitol in Salem, Oregon, and give thanks for her down-to-earth trainings and support. In 2007, our world changed again when I became Speaker of the House. As always, Claire was the rock of our operation, even as I assumed my new duties, and then shortly after the 2007 session, took on the long-shot race of running for the U.S. Senate. When I was elected to the Senate in 2008, Claire applied her enormous skills to lead my casework team. She and her team have done an amazing job. If you would like to see proof, just visit her office in Portland. The wall is covered in multitudes of thank you notes. Recently, I received this letter from a constituent. Senator, you hardly need one of your constituents to tell you how great your staff operates, but I must try. I recently had a problem with government bureaucracy, and I was beyond frustration. Then 2 years ago, I contacted your office and was put in contact with Claire Griffin. I may have found my government to be unresponsive before this, but from that day forward, I have been amazed. My issue didn't even affect very many people, but Claire did not let those facts guide her efforts. From the very beginning, she made me feel that my problem was worthy of her total effort. The letter continues, in the end, Claire brought the mountain to me, and a large part of my problem was resolved. The frustration that I experienced for so many years with an unresponsive government has been lifted through her actions. Like so many other letters through the years, he closed by thanking Claire. For the past 13 years, I've always appreciated Claire's dedication as a staff member, but I've been equally blessed to know her as a person. If anyone should doubt, I can testify that Claire has been the funniest person in Oregon politics. She wields her wit like a sword, and sometimes it stings. But you can't help but smile even when her comments make you smart. She made it, in part, her job to make sure that the various offices didn't go to my head, and she was very good at this. And when she trained legislative assistants in Salem, she made sure that they were trained in how to keep their bosses from taking their office too much to their headband. Claire has been a full member of my and Mary's extended family. She joined the team when my son Jonathan was 2 years old and my daughter Bryn was a newborn. She has stepped in to cut down the mountains and fill in the valleys all along this 13-year journey. She gave my son Jonathan the best gift he's ever had, a box of 8 classy adventure novels rewritten for a little tyke to read, and he enjoyed them immensely. She rescued me when I forgot my ID card and couldn't get through airport security. As you can imagine, over the years, she's been there through one crisis, one challenge after another. Claire, I couldn't have done it without you. My family couldn't have done it without you. Thank you for joining our team and our family and working so hard to make this journey a success. Claire, you have carried on the fight to build a better world, and you have carried on that fight with heart and humor. Thank you. We will miss you. Please enjoy your well-earned retirement, and of course, keep in touch. You will always be a valued member of Team Merkley. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
The senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. President. That was a beautiful tribute by my colleague, and I wanted to come to the floor to just speak for a few minutes while we are trying to figure a way forward on a very important piece of legislation having to do with the transportation infrastructure for our nation. I know it's a bill that Senator Boxer, as the chair of the EPW committee, has worked tirelessly on for years, along with Senator Inhofe. It's a very important piece of legislation authorizing billions of dollars of programs and projects. And I really want to say that I appreciate her leadership so much, and I'm so hoping that the Republican leadership and the Democratic leadership can come together so sometime in the next few days we can have some votes relative to this important piece of legislation and move forward, because I know for the people that I represent in Louisiana, this is one of our most important infrastructure bills, and I'm sure, Mr. President, that you have many people in Pennsylvania talking with you about the importance of getting these road projects authorized at a time when people are looking for jobs and looking for work. This would be one of the bills we'd like to pass. So let's all be patient, but not too patient, to get this through, because it's very important. But while we're waiting for that, I thought I'd come to the floor on this very special day, Valentine's Day, to talk about a very special kind of love that happens between children and parents. And you know, Mr. President, because you've been really a wonderful, wonderful leader, along with many others here on the floor, for the idea that every child deserves a protective family, and that children really don't do a very good job of raising themselves. Governments don't do a really good job of raising children. Children really need to be raised in a family, and a child should be with their siblings whenever possible, raised under the protective arms, or in the protective arms and under the watchful eye of parents, at least one responsible adult. And Mr. President, you know how heartbreaking it is on every day, but particularly a day like today, where we're sending cards to our loved ones. I know the first call I made was to my husband this morning and to my children to wish them a happy Valentine's. People are doing that all over the world today. In fact, I was given some very interesting information. I had no idea that 180 million Valentine's cards are purchased today. 180 million, that's pretty amazing. 200 million roses are sold today, and 36 million heart-shaped boxes of chocolate are eaten today. Now, I haven't gotten my box of chocolate yet. I don't know if you have, but I'm still looking for mine. But, you know, the sad thing is that there are millions of children that are not going to receive a phone call today. They're not going to receive a card. They will not receive a box of chocolate. And they may not even receive a pat on the head or a hug or a letter, a word of encouragement, because they're orphans. These are children that live all over the world, in our own country, sad to say. We have about 100,000 children in our foster care system that have had their biological parents, their rights terminated because of either gross neglect or abuse. Children that are waiting for another family to step up. You, Mr. President, were very active and successful in passing the adoption tax credit provision that provides some financial assistance to families that are stepping up to adopt children in need in our own country and around the world. There are 100,000 children waiting for that Valentine card or that box of chocolate or that hug, or just to belong to a family. And around the world, we don't even know what those numbers are. They're just overwhelming. We know that in countries that have high incidence of AIDS, for instance, the death of a parent, particularly a mom, but a dad as well, really leaves in sometimes families of 8 children, 9 children, 6 children abandoned. Even if a grandmother steps up to try to do that work and she dies within a few years, what happens to these children? Well, you and I and many of my colleagues here, I'm proud to say, have introduced a resolution today, and I want to thank my co-sponsors, particularly Senator Lugar, who has been just a terrific advocate as the former chair and now ranking member of the Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Klobuchar, Senator Grassley, who's my co-chair on the Foster Care Caucus, Senator Gillibrand, Senator Inhofe, who's probably traveled to more countries, more times in Africa than any senator in the history of our country, and he should be commended for the work that he's doing on that continent. And then Senator Blumenthal and Senator Boozman, who have been outstanding advocates in their own right for different aspects of family policy. We are proud to introduce a sense of the Senate resolution. Of course, does not have the force of law, but it most certainly expresses our views as a body and does have impact on policymakers around the world. and nonprofits and faith-based community and private, the private sector. And most importantly, governments around the world, when they say, what does the federal government, or they'll probably say, they won't say that, they would say, what does the Senate think about this, Senator? Or what, you say this, but what do the other senators think about the fact of adoption or international adoption? Or do they agree with you that children belong in a family? Because, Mr. President, it's sad to say that there are some places in this world that think that children can grow up fine in an institution, or they can grow up fine without parents. Now, we don't think that in the United States. Not only does our heart and our mind and our faith tell us that, but the science also says that children who grow up outside of a family or without that loving, nurturing, particularly in the early years. You know this is true raising your own children. I know this as a mother, those early years, and every year, but particularly those early years where infants get the confidence and the affirmation of kindness and gentleness from a parent. I've been learning more about this lately, not only how important that is, but what I've been learning is what the science says when children don't get that. The term that the American Academy of Pediatrics just released is called toxic stress. Toxic stress on the brains of infants. They underline how even one caring and supportive relationship with an adult in those early years is so important that it can offset the damaging neurological and physiological effects of stress on children. I know adults have stress because I have it myself. What I didn't realize, Mr. President, was that infants, tiniest little infants, can have toxic stress that affects the development of their brain and their ability to function. I hope that our country will realize how important it is for us to do a better job of connecting orphans and abandoned infants and neglected children of all ages, not to put them in institution, not to turn them out on the street, not to allow them to be trafficked by drug cartels or sex traders or people that will exploit them for other purposes, but to put them in the arms of a loving family, connecting them to a loving and responsible adult. We, of course, try to keep children in their own biological families when possible, but if war, disease, or death separates them, why do we not think that it's not the most important thing in the world, because it is, to connect those children to a loving family? That's what this resolution says. It's just as simple as we can say it on Valentine's Day. For kids that will never get a kiss or a box of chocolate or haven't yet, there's still hope that we can give them a family, a protective family, that we can protect these sibling groups. And if government would work just a little bit smarter, not even necessarily throwing that much more money, although you can always use a little extra, I find, but just working smarter and better and working with the churches, working with faith-based communities around the world, we can connect children to families. That's all this resolution says. It expresses the sense of the Senate. I hope that we can pass this by unanimous consent. So when I travel around the world, as I do often, when I'm in Guatemala or when I'm in Uganda or when I have been in places like Russia and in China, and the senators there, or the members or the people, the leaders ask me, what do the other senators say? Do they believe this as well? I can say, absolutely, I'm going to carry this resolution with me and I'm going to show it to them, because that's all this resolution says, is that every child in the world deserves a protective and loving family. So I don't know if Valentine's Day will be perfect for many children. I hope that my children have had a wonderful day today, but we can work a little harder to try to do our best to make sure that they have at least one caring, nurturing, loving adult in their life. It would make the world of difference in our school systems, in our health care system, in our criminal justice system. It will make our communities stronger. It will make our states and our nation stronger, and ultimately the world. I know that you believe that, Mr. President, so I thank the leadership for allowing me to come to the floor and speak on this today, and hopefully all of my colleagues will vote favorably for this Senate resolution. And I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Mississippi.
I asked to speak as if in morning business.
Without objection.
And, Mr. President, thank you. I expect that a resolution authorizing National Crime Victims' Rights Week will be adopted unanimously by the Senate in a few moments. And I wanted to come to the floor today and reaffirm my support for the rights and needs of survivors of crime. I also want to express my gratitude for the dedicated crime victims advocates, as well as the health and law enforcement professionals who work to fight crime and help its victims recover. Keeping our neighborhoods and communities safe is and will always be a top priority of this country. But close to 20 million Americans are victims of crime each year. And these individuals and their families are confronted with unique and difficult challenges. Acts of crime inflict lasting physical, emotional, and psychological wounds that take time and care to heal. It is important that the necessary resources and services be available to help rebuild the lives of crime survivors. National Crime Victims' Rights Week, which our nation has commemorated annually for the last 30 years, renews our commitment to those impacted by crime and the ways we can help them move forward. It is a time for remembrance and reflection, a moment to pause and honor victims, advocates, professionals, and volunteers. This year's theme is ambitious but critical, extending the vision, reaching every victim. This calls on each of us to make sure that all victims get the help they need. Too many victims are still unable to receive the protections and services they deserve. Our efforts toward better safety and security now are integral to ensuring the safety and security of future generations. On April 8, 1981, President Ronald Reagan proclaimed the first Crime Victims' Rights Week. As a former prosecutor myself, I remember when the concept of victims' rights was practically unknown, as few mechanisms for victims' assistance and support even existed. With his first proclamation, President Reagan fulfilled an important and long-awaited call to put the concerns and rights of crime victims on the national agenda. As President Reagan said in the first proclamation in 1981, we need a renewed emphasis on and an enhanced sensitivity to the rights of victims. These rights should be a central concern of those who participate in the criminal justice system, and it is time all of us paid greater heed to the plight of victims. Mr. President, this pioneering vision of President Reagan is one we continue to embrace today. We are blessed to live in a nation of good Samaritans, and we have achieved impressive strides toward helping crime victims get the services they need. But the task of preventing crime and healing its harmful effects remains a constant battle. Technology, globalization, and new types of criminal behavior have made the challenge before us more complex than ever before. Our fight against crime in the 21st century will take strategic partnerships at the local, state, and national levels. It will rely on supportive, vigilant, and compassionate communities and individuals. Serving these individuals is more than an act of kindness. It helps make all of our homes, neighborhoods, and communities safer and stronger. The resolution I have introduced with Senator Leahy, Schumer, and Grassley, and which I expect to be passed today, supports the mission and goals of this year's National Crime Victims' Rights Week. I urge my colleagues to continue supporting those who have suffered crime's effects and a renewed commitment toward reducing crime during this week, which this year will be observed the week of April 22nd. In closing, we have come a long way since the days when crime victims had few rights and services. Yet it is also true that too many crimes are still committed and too few are reported, and that many victims struggle to overcome the lasting effects of crime. I'm pleased that National Crime Victims' Rights Week offers us the opportunity each year to highlight the needs of crime survivors, recognize those who helped them, and engage the public in the fight for victims' rights. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor. I note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Alexander. I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the quorum call.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration en bloc of the following resolutions which were submitted earlier today: S-Res 373, S-Res 374, and S-Res 375.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measures en bloc.
I ask unanimous consent the resolutions be agreed to, the preambles be agreed to, the motions to reconsider be laid on the table en bloc with no intervening action or debate, and any statements related to the resolutions be printed in the record at the appropriate place as if read.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to speak on one of these resolutions, the resolution number 375 about the Columbus, Ohio bicentennial. Today marks the 200th anniversary of the founding of the city of Columbus, the largest city, one of the great cities of America, the capital of the great state of Ohio. I've lived in different neighborhoods in Columbus over the last 30 years, from German Village to Berwick to the Hilltop. My grandson lives in Clintonville. My daughter lives in, grandson and his parents, he's only 3, live in Clintonville, a great neighborhood in sort of the north side of Columbus. Our daughter lives in the short north, one of the most exciting places of any city in the Midwest. For 200 years, Columbus has been a hub of economic and cultural activity for the state. We talk often in Columbus about the brain gain, how Columbus is one of the fastest growing cities in the Midwest and east of the Mississippi. Columbus started in its early days as a trading post along the Scioto River, continued as steamboats and railroads connected more people with new opportunities and new commerce. I should add that the presiding officer, if I'm allowed to say this, once lived in the great city of Columbus. I think I'm allowed to say that. He now is the very able junior senator from Colorado. During the Civil War, Columbus became an important location for the Union Army and something we're particularly proud of for the Underground Railroad. Through the turmoil of that era, President Lincoln signed the Morrill Act, which created the Ohio Agricultural and Mechanical College, which led to that, the creation of the Agricultural Mechanical College in 1870. In 1878, it was renamed Ohio State University. Today, OSU is one of the nation's premier public universities, and there are many other institutions of higher learning in Columbus. Capital University, established much earlier than that, in 1830. The Columbus College of Art and Design, established in 1879. The Pontifical College Josephinum, established in 1888. Franklin University, established in 1902. The Mount Carmel College of Nursing in 1903. Ohio Dominican University, established in 1911, the year my father was born. And the Columbus State Community College, established, one of Ohio's part of the great group of community colleges that were visiting the Capitol today. There are many people from those colleges, established in 1963. Columbus is home to some of the nation's earliest schools for Americans living with disabilities. The Ohio School for the Deaf was established in 1829. Many graduates of that school have gone on to Gallaudet University, located in Washington, founded during the Civil War by Abraham Lincoln, the most outstanding school of its kind in the country. The Ohio School for the Blind was established in 1837. 2011, Columbus's library system was named the best in the United States as the recipient of the National Medal for Museum and Library Service. Columbus prospered in the post-Civil War era through new banks, expanded railroad networks, extended streetcar service in the city's first waterworks system. Manufacturers, from horse and buggy manufacturers to steel and brewers, made Columbus an important location for organized labor. The American Federation of Labor, which later merged with the Congress of Industrial Organizations into the AFL-C, what we know today as the AFL-CIO. The American Federation of Labor was founded in Columbus 116 years ago in 1886. Today, the legacy of advanced manufacturing continues at Ohio's cutting-edge Edison Networks, the Ohio Manufacturing Association, and Battelle. The spirit of the labor movement continues as workers of Columbus local unions represent all types of industries and professions. Attracted by world-class workforces and cultural outlets, leading retail corporations, healthcare and insurance companies, and financial institutions such as the Limited, Nationwide, Grange, Cardinal Health, and Huntington all call Columbus their home. It's a leader in cutting-edge medical research and hospital systems. We see it at the Ohio State Medical Center, the Arthur James Cancer Hospital, the Richard Soloff Research Institute, nationwide children's hospitals, among almost all ranking of the top 10 children's hospitals in America. 3 of them are in Ohio consistently, Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati, in addition to other great children's hospitals in Ohio, Mount Carmel Hospital, Riverside Community, and Grant Medical Center. Columbus is a crown jewel of arts and cultures in the Midwest. The majestic Southern Theater, which was one of Southern Theater and Hotel, have attracted world-class performances for more than 100 years. The Southern Hotel was one of President Theodore Roosevelt's favorite stops as he traveled through the Midwest. The short north is the epicenter of the burgeoning art scene, homes to galleries and parks and restaurants like Betty's, the Happy Greek, Ginny's Ice Cream, and the North Market that attract an incredible number of young people with energy and commitment to that city. It hosts some of the Midwest's largest concert fairs and festivals, ranging from ComFest to the Pride Festival. Columbus is also home to the Midwest's largest 4th of July festival and the very famous Ohio State Fair. Mayor Coleman and the Columbus Partnership, which is the business but much more than just businesses organization, are doing a tremendous job promoting economic development from the South Campus Gateway to the short north to the Scioto Riverfront into German Village. And like Ohioans across the state, the people have long served those who serve us, our veterans. One of the first Veterans of Foreign War chapters in the country was founded in Columbus in 1899. Aside from Columbus is also known for great sports teams, obviously Ohio State, Columbus Clippers, Columbus Crew, and the Columbus Blue Jackets. This year, the City of Columbus will commence a year-long bicentennial celebration with the theme Honoring the Past, Celebrating the Present, and Envisioning the Future. In doing so, it will celebrate the economic, cultural, educational, and artistic contributions of the people of Columbus to our great state and our great nation. So on behalf of the United States Senate, with unanimous consent, I wish all the citizens of Columbus a happy 200th anniversary. I thank the presiding officer. Mr. President, I understand that S-2105, introduced earlier today by Senator Lieberman, is at the desk, and I ask for its first reading.
The clerk will read the title of the bill for the first time.
S-2105, a bill to enhance the security and resiliency of the cyber and communications infrastructure of the United States.
President, I ask for the second reading and object to my own request.
Objection is heard. The bill will be read the second time on the next legislative day.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that, notwithstanding a resolution of the Senate of January 24, 1901, the traditional reading of Washington's farewell address take place on Monday, February 27, 2012, at a time to be determined by the majority leader in consultation with the Republican leader.
Without objection.
And one of the great traditions in this body. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the appointment at the desk appear separately in the record as if made by the chair.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate adjourn until 9:30 on Wednesday, February 15th, that following the prayer and the pledge, the Journal of Proceedings be approved to date, the morning hour be deemed expired, and the time for the two leaders be reserved for their use later in the day, that following any leader remarks, the Senate be in a period of morning business until noon, with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, with the time equally divided and controlled between the leaders or their designees, with the Republicans controlling the first 30 minutes and the majority controlling the second 30. That following morning business, the Senate proceed to executive session to resume consideration of the Jordan nomination with 2 minutes of debate equally divided and controlled in the usual form prior to a vote on confirmation of the Jordan nomination. That upon confirmation of the nomination, the motion to be reconsidered be made and laid upon the be considered be made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate. That no further motions be in order. That any related statements be printed in the record. That the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action, and the Senate then resume legislative session in consideration of S. 1813, the Surface Transportation Bill.
Without objection.
Mr. President, the first vote tomorrow will be at approximately noon on confirmation of the Jordan nomination. Additional votes in relation to the amendments to the Surface Transportation Bill are possible. If there's no further business come before the Senate, I ask that it recess under the previous order.
The Senate stands adjourned until 9:30 a.m. tomorrow.
We're going live now to the U.S. Senate on this Tuesday morning. We'll hear general speeches until about 11 o'clock this morning, when the Senate will then continue consideration